The sun was hot, and the dust swirled in small clouds over the quiet town. The buildings were simple, mostly wooden, and the streets were lined with rough planks. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else, and strangers were watched with suspicion. Today, however, there was more activity than usual. People were gathering in the dusty yard near the center of town. An auction was being held. The air was tense, buzzing with curiosity and a hint of excitement. Livestock, tools, and other items were spread out for bidding. But one item, standing quietly at the edge of the crowd, drew more attention than anyone could imagine. She was an Apache woman, tall and composed, with hair as dark as the night and eyes that held both fear and courage. She stood with her hands folded in front of her, her posture straight, even though she knew she had little choice in her situation. The townspeople whispered among themselves, "She's an Apache. Who would want her?" One man said under his breath. Another shook his head. "No one should bid for her. It's not worth it," he muttered. Children peered curiously from behind barrels, and the adults seemed uncomfortable, unsure of how to react. The auctioneer, a loud man with a booming voice, started the event with a flourish. "First, we have the livestock, cows, horses, and tools. Come and place your bids." The crowd moved forward, eager to buy cattle and wagons. Laughter and chatter filled the air as prices were shouted and hands waved. Everything was going well until the Apache woman was brought forward. The moment she stepped onto the platform, the chatter died down. The auctioneer clapped his hands, trying to draw attention. "And now, we have this young woman, strong and healthy. Any bids?" he shouted. Silence followed. Not a single hand was raised. The people looked at each other awkwardly. Some shifted on their feet, uneasy. Others whispered quietly, avoiding eye contact. She looked around the crowd, her eyes steady but wary, sensing the hesitation and judgment. The auctioneer frowned. "Come now, don't be shy. Who will offer for her?" He stomped his foot, frustration rising in his voice. But the silence remained. People turned away, pretending to check their boots or their pockets. Some muttered that it was not proper to bid. Others just did not care. The Apache woman stood still, her dignity intact, though a faint worry passed across her face. She had faced many dangers before, but this quiet, invisible rejection stung in its own way. As the auctioneer's patience began to fade, a figure appeared at the edge of the crowd. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with the calm assurance of a man who knew his work and his land. The rancher had spent most of his life on the open plains, working quietly, helping his neighbors when needed, and keeping to himself when possible. He was not a man of many words, but his presence commanded respect. The townspeople noticed him immediately and began whispering, "What's he doing here? Do you think he will bid?" "He's quiet. Too quiet." "Maybe." The rancher walked slowly toward the auction platform. He stopped a few feet away from the woman, studying her with a steady, thoughtful gaze. Unlike the rest of the crowd, he did not see her as something to judge or fear. He saw her strength, her courage, and the human dignity she carried even in a moment of helplessness. He did not speak, but his expression said enough. He was considering a choice, one that would surprise everyone. The auctioneer tried again, his voice rising in frustration. "Come now, someone. Anyone. This is your chance." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. No one dared to move. Some were angry that the quiet rancher might act before them. Others were simply shocked at their own hesitation. The Apache woman kept her head straight, her dark eyes meeting the rancher's for a brief moment. She could feel the calm, quiet strength in him. A flicker of hope sparked within her, but she said nothing, unsure if it would last. The rancher raised a hand slowly, and the crowd gasped. A single, deliberate motion, yet it changed everything. He placed a bid, Not a boastful, high bid, but enough to make it clear that he would take responsibility. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some people shook their heads in disbelief. Why him? Why now? They whispered. Others looked on silently, some with admiration, most with surprise. The auctioneer blinked, taken aback, and then nodded reluctantly. "It's yours, sir," he said. The rancher nodded in return, his face calm, unreadable. He did not boast, he did not shout, but his choice spoke louder than any words. The Apache woman was to leave the auction, not as an object, but as a human being, given a chance. The townspeople slowly began to disperse, some embarrassed, some still curious. Children stared openly, fascinated by the turn of events. The woman stepped down from the platform, keeping her composure as the rancher moved to escort her out. No one followed. No one tried to intervene. It was as if the quiet strength of the rancher had created a bubble of respect around her, a moment where nothing else could touch them. As they walked through the dusty streets toward the ranch, the woman finally allowed herself to breathe more freely. She did not speak yet, not because she was afraid, but because she was processing the sudden change in her fate. The rancher walked beside her silently. Every step he took was careful, measured. He did not rush, did not demand anything. His quiet demeanor made her feel safe, something she had not felt in a long time. Along the way, the townspeople peeked from windows and doorways, their eyes following the pair. Some whispered in surprise, realizing that the quiet man, the rancher who had always kept to himself, had just performed an act of courage that few would have dared. Others muttered under their breath, wondering why he would do such a thing. Perhaps they could not understand his motivations. But that did not matter. What mattered was that he had acted. He had stepped forward when everyone else had turned away. The journey to the ranch was long enough for the woman to observe her surroundings. She noticed the rolling plains, the hills in the distance, and the quiet strength of the man beside her. He did not talk much, but his presence was comforting. She realized that courage did not always shout. Sometimes, courage was quiet. It was steady. It was choosing what was right, even when others refused to act. Finally, the ranch appeared in the distance, a modest home surrounded by wide-open fields. Horses grazed in the pastures, and the wind carried the smell of grass and earth. The woman's heart lifted slightly. For the first time, in what felt like forever, she felt the possibility of safety and respect. The rancher led her inside, showing her a place to rest, food to eat, and a promise of protection. He did not make speeches, did not offer false comforts. He simply provided a beginning. That night, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the stars began to appear, the woman looked out over the plains. She thought about the auction, the silent crowd, and the moment when the quiet rancher had stepped forward. She realized that life could be harsh and cruel, but there were still moments of goodness, of quiet heroism, that could change everything. She felt a spark of hope, fragile, but real. The rancher, sitting across the room, watched her silently. He did not ask for gratitude or admiration. In a world where people often judged by appearances, he had seen a human being in need and had acted without hesitation. The bond of trust was forming, not through words, but through actions. And so, in that quiet ranch house on the edge of the plains, a new chapter began. The Apache woman, once ignored and rejected, now had a chance to live with dignity. The quiet rancher, often overlooked by the townspeople, had quietly changed not only her life but, in some small way, the moral compass of the town itself. The dust of the auction yard had settled, but the impact of a single, courageous step would echo far longer. The night grew deep, and the plains lay silent. Somewhere between fear and hope, between silence and action, The story of two unlikely companions had begun. One had the courage to act, and the other the strength to endure. And together, they would face whatever came next, guided by quiet determination and the promise of a new beginning. The morning sun rose over the ranch, casting long shadows across the wide fields. The Apache woman stood by the window, watching the horses graze. For the first time in a long time, she felt a quiet peace. Life had been hard and uncertain, but here, with the quiet rancher, she had safety and respect. She did not speak much, as words were not always necessary. Actions mattered more, and she had already seen that in him. The rancher moved silently through the kitchen, preparing breakfast. He worked with steady hands, each movement calm and deliberate. He did not rush, but he also did not waste a moment. When he placed a plate of food in front of her, he simply nodded, giving her a small, understanding smile. She looked at him, noticing the quiet strength in his eyes. He did not ask for thanks, and she did not offer any. There was no need. Trust was growing, slowly, in the quiet moments between them. Days passed, and the Apache woman began to learn the rhythm of life on the ranch. She helped with chores, not because she was forced, but because she wanted to contribute. She knew how to care for animals, how to mend fences, and how to work the land. The rancher watched her closely, occasionally giving advice, but mostly allowing her to do things her own way. He respected her skills and her independence. As they worked together, a bond started to form. It was quiet at first, built from shared tasks and mutual respect. She would teach him things he did not know: how to track movements in the wild, how to find clean water in hidden places, and how to use herbs for minor injuries. He, in turn, taught her how to manage cattle, how to handle a rope, and how to navigate the ranch safely. They spoke little, but every lesson exchanged strengthened their trust. The town, however, did not forget what had happened at the auction. Some townspeople whispered as they passed by the ranch, "Why would he take her in?" Third, "She's different. It's not right. That quiet man is acting strange." Their words carried judgment, but the rancher paid them no mind. He had chosen what he believed was right, and nothing else mattered. The woman sensed the tension from the town, but within the ranch, she felt safe. She learned that courage sometimes meant facing judgment quietly, without argument, and staying true to one's own principles. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled across the plains. Dark clouds filled the sky, and strong winds shook the trees. Cattle grew restless, and the rancher quickly ran to secure them. The Apache woman ran alongside him, helping to herd the frightened animals into the shelter of the barn. The storm was fierce, but together they managed to keep the livestock safe. In those moments, neither spoke much, yet each understood the other perfectly. Danger had a way of revealing strength and building trust. Even in peaceful moments, they learned from each other. The woman showed the rancher how to move silently across the land, how to listen for small sounds, and how to read the signs of nature. The rancher, in turn, shared the rhythms of ranch life, teaching her patience and persistence. Each day brought small victories and lessons, and slowly, the woman's confidence grew. She was no longer just surviving. She was living, contributing, and finding a sense of purpose. As months passed, the bond between them became stronger. The rancher never treated her as someone to control. He treated her as an equal, respecting her experience and her strength. The woman began to share stories of her past, carefully, in small pieces. She spoke of her family, of the lands she had grown up in, and of the challenges she had faced. The rancher listened, never interrupting, offering only the quiet support that made her feel heard and valued. One day, a group of townspeople came to the ranch. They had heard rumors of the woman's presence and had come to see for themselves. Some looked skeptical, some curious, and others quietly impressed. They watched as the woman moved gracefully among the animals, directing the rancher on certain tasks and showing her skill and intelligence. Slowly, their attitudes began to change. They saw not a captive or an outsider, but a capable, strong, and respected woman who had found her place. Despite these small victories, challenges remained. The plains were harsh and unforgiving, and life on the ranch was not easy. There were accidents, illnesses, and occasional threats from the wild. But in each trial, the woman and the rancher faced the challenges together. Each problem solved, each danger overcome, only strengthened their partnership. They learned that strength was not just physical, but also the courage to face difficulties side by side. The woman also began to understand more about the quiet rancher. He had lived a life of solitude, often judged by others for being reserved. Yet, beneath his calm exterior, he was courageous and kind. He had acted when others hesitated, and that single choice had changed the course of her life. She realized that heroism did not always roar in the streets. Sometimes it whispered in quiet acts of integrity and compassion. Winter came, and with it, the harsh cold of the plains. The woman helped prepare firewood, mended clothing, and kept the ranch running smoothly. The rancher worked tirelessly, as always, and together they kept the home and animals safe. Life was still demanding, but they faced it with confidence, knowing that they could rely on each other. The woman no longer felt like a stranger in the world. She had a home, a purpose, and someone who respected her completely. By spring, the town had fully taken notice. People began to approach the ranch with respect rather than judgment. They saw the woman's skills, her intelligence, and her resilience. They watched the rancher, realizing that his quiet strength had created something remarkable. The story of the auction faded into memory, replaced by the story of two people who had chosen to live with dignity, courage, and respect. The Apache woman had grown in confidence and independence. She could manage many aspects of the ranch alone, but she never did so in isolation. She and the rancher worked as a team, each valuing the other's contributions. Their bond was not built on words or promises, but on actions, trust, and mutual respect. Each day, they faced life's challenges together, and in doing so, they inspired those around them to see beyond fear and prejudice. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky with colors of orange and gold, the woman and the rancher sat on the porch, watching the plains stretch into the distance. The air was quiet except for the soft sounds of animals and wind. She finally spoke, her voice calm and steady. "I never thought I could feel safe like this," she said. The rancher nodded, giving a small smile. "You deserve safety. You deserve respect. That hasn't changed," he replied. In that simple exchange, they both understood something profound. Life was not always fair, and the world could be cruel. But when people acted with courage and integrity, they could create hope where there was none. The woman had found freedom and dignity, and the rancher had demonstrated the quiet power of doing what is right. Together, they had changed not only their own lives but also the perception of the town and the land around them. Over the years, the Apache woman became an important part of the ranch and the wider community. She used her skills to help others, teaching, tracking, healing, and survival techniques. The rancher continued his quiet work, leading with fairness and integrity. The partnership they had formed at that auction, built on trust and respect, became an example for others. People learned that courage was not always loud, and kindness was not always easy, but both could change lives. And so, the story of the quiet rancher and the Apache woman became more than just a tale of rescue. It became a story of resilience, trust, and the power of human dignity. The auction, where no one had offered, faded into memory, But the lesson of courage, respect, and quiet heroism remained. The woman, once ignored and overlooked, now had a life of purpose and safety. The rancher, once quiet and unnoticed, had quietly transformed not just her life, but the hearts of those around him. Together, they proved that true strength is shown through actions, that respect can overcome fear, and that even in a world full of challenges, hope can always be found. The plains stretched endlessly before them, full of opportunity and promise. They faced the future together, ready for whatever challenges might come. Their story was not just about survival, but about the power of choosing what is right, even when no one else does. And in that quiet strength, both of them had found a new life, one built on trust, courage, and the simple but powerful truth that every person deserves respect.